Welcome to the Probate Podcast, where we talk about all the things you didn't know you need to know about probate. My name is Sherri Lund, and I'm so glad that you're here. I want you to understand the process and to know what to expect because it's going to make things easier and it's going to save you money. And I'm here to show you how. Hi there, my name is Sherri Lund, and this is the Probate Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today. I'm the founder of Willowwood Solutions, and I help reduce the overwhelm for people when they're dealing with the senior transition, whether it's what to do with the stuff in the house, how to downsize, how to consider funding for long-term care, and then navigating probate afterwards. I'm not an attorney, but I help with the logistics that attorneys don't do. So I'm really glad to have my guest here today, Nick Dupre. He is an attorney here in the Woodlands. Nick and I have known each other for a year and a half or so now, and I'm just so excited to have him. So, Nick, thanks so much for taking time out of your day and meeting me here today.
No, thanks for having me. Always good to chat with you, Sherri. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always fun when we chat. Okay, let me read a little bit about Nick to you. In 2004, Nick Dupre earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Trinity University, beautiful area. In 2007, he earned his law degree from Texas A&M School of Law, and he spent over 10 years at two premier boutique firms in the Houston area and Woodlands before he and his business partner opened up Stanfield and Dupre in 2017. He's board certified in estate planning and probates, and he concentrates on probate, estate and gift tax planning, business planning, taxation, asset protection, and more. Nick's a member of the Houston Business Estate Planning Council and the Disability and Elder Law Attorneys Association and the Woodlands Kiwanis Club. He's a native Houstonian, married to his lovely wife, Adrienne. They have 4 children. Nick's an accomplished pianist, and he regularly competes in marathons and other endurance events. Recently completed his 3rd full-distance Ironman triathlon. That's crazy.
That's what my wife said.
So again, Nick, thanks so much for meeting me here. I didn't realize that you play. I knew that you were into endurance sports, and I knew that you had done one Ironman, but I didn't know that you were a pianist. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, no. So my mother started me young, and that's I went to Trinity on a piano scholarship.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's really neat. So let's say that you and I were volunteering at a fundraiser event in the Woodlands somewhere, and we were packing up, and I just say, "Hey, Nick, you seem like a nice guy. What do you do?" If you didn't talk about law, if you didn't talk about like work, how would you answer that question?
well, that's a good question. So I always tell people in my elevator speech in meeting people is I am a Christian husband, father, and attorney in that order. So that's kind of how I value things. And from my perspective, if I'm doing the top right, everything kind of falls into place. When those things start to waver, not so good, but that's kind of where my priorities are for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how did you get into law and specifically this aspect of law?
You mentioned the piano part. I was that's a wayward starving artist on the path to being a pianist in college. I loved piano. I've been playing it since I was 4 years old. And I met somebody from the San Antonio Symphony because they would give you free tickets. And I started talking to them and they said like, oh no, I sell insurance during the week and I do this on the side. And I was like, oh, that does not sound exciting. And then I met my chemical engineer wife and I were dating, and she made kind of a passive comment of like, when are you going to choose a real major besides piano? Like, oh, okay. So I need a real job. And honestly, I did not know at that point. I was like, I guess I need to figure stuff out because I loved piano, but I realized I didn't love it that passionately to do it my entire life or do it for $50 a week. So just concentrated on political science, and I would say fell into law school as not sure what I want to do, but I think this is a good path. And then in law school, I will say, so my mother died when I was in undergrad and my dad died when I was in law school. And so I got a taste of the probate estate planning part of it. And that kind of piqued my interest and realized in law school, not many kids are focusing on that. I think rightly so. They're corporate work or heavy litigator, or I'm going to be just, the next best attorney in the world who's But probate and estate planning is you take a course or two in law school, but it's not highly focused on. After my dad's probate, which was not a great probate, my mother's was seamless. My dad's, nobody was contesting, but I think just the attorney and the communication was a lot different. And so that kind of piqued my interest. And then I saw, like, nobody else is focusing on this. And it's for my personality. As I started interviewing other attorneys, I was like, this is a great, I'm not going to be a litigator. I don't have the propensity to argue for the sake of arguing. But this kind of, to your point, I think you mentioned earlier, just helping people through a time that seems overwhelming, but the legal aspect of probate to me is pretty simple. So that piqued my interest. And then that's all I've ever done since I graduated.
That's all so nice and straightforward, but you also experienced it. And so you also know what you want to offer your clients and help them avoid. I mean,
I think that helped a ton for sure. I don't know that I would have chosen that had that happened. I don't pretend to know what everybody's going through, but I think having, just like any life experience, if you got a taste of it, you kind of can empathize or sympathize a little bit better.
and so did you and Brent know each other in school, or how did y'all connect?
My partner, Brent, no. So he went to Nebraska and then he came down his second year out of law school. And then he and I started working I got fired from my first law firm because I
Good job.
didn't know how to practice law. And then the second firm that hired me, he was already there. And so we worked there for 10 years or so. And then he went off to do something by himself and then came back to the law. And then as he was doing that, I was like, hey, I'm leaving. You think we could do something together? And it's been it's worked out really well. So, but yeah, I've been doing it for 15 years.
And one of the things that I think is unique about your partnership and what you bring to your clients is you are so relatable. I mean, I get to talk to a lot of attorneys, and I only work with and refer to people that I know and like and talk to. But you guys you're very relational. You're very,
Thank you.
yeah. I mean, you communicate well. You're not. It's not just transactional with you. You're relational, and you do that with me, and I'm sure you do that with your clients. It just seems to be part of who you are, what's important to you. And so I remember when we first met, and I asked you if you're a litigator, and you were like, "Oh no, that's not me." And you just said that too. And it's good to know what you're not, but also because Brent is,
Yep.
you guys your clients don't have to change midstream with somebody. So they can start out with you with the estate where you're really getting to know them as people. But if a problem comes up and they need to go to court to argue something, you've got that
Yeah,
covered.
absolutely. And Brent does a phenomenal job and he is a great litigator. It's personality driven in terms of where you end up in the law. But I would agree with that. And I think that's part of the reason we did end up kind of together is his insight and value on, if I'm doing a probate or drafting a contract, his insight on, like, that's a great clause or great thing to put in there. But I'll tell you, if I end up in a lawsuit, I'm going to tear that apart. So here's something you need to think through. Or when we're applying for a probate and we think there might be a contest, but we're not sure, like, hey, let's do this extra application to kind of make that a little cleaner. So
Oh,
you're
that's
right.
really
He's been
interesting. So,
invaluable. Yeah,
yeah, so his foresight into what potentially could be a problem can help direct what you're doing in the present.
for sure. My job as a drafter and estate planner is to kind of head as much of that off as I can.
Right,
But, you never know what it's going to look like in court or how it's
right,
going to turn out when you litigate it. Or Brett does
right.
because he's done it a million times.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
definitely helpful to have that insight and just bounce ideas off of, right? It's always
right.
harder to do it by yourself.
For sure. Yeah, y'all are very complementary. So, talking about estate plans, hear a lot about wills. If you talk to attorneys, you'll hear a lot about trusts. Some attorneys are like all trusts. Can you describe what they are? Just assume that people are listening that don't know what they are, and what they are and how they differ.
So will versus trust, probably our most popular question, I'll tell you. And it's a good one. So I'll start by telling you on the overall scheme of estate planning, we're talking about, I break it up into boxes, but to me, we're talking about the first box of who gets my stuff if I'm dead, period. Right. That's what your will or living trust is for. Just words on paper that tell us where stuff goes, who's in charge. The primary difference between a will and a living trust is I have to probate a will. And if you do it right, I do not have to probate a living trust, right? The words on paper are exactly the same. They both say all to my spouse, then to my kids, or then to my kids in trust. I explain it to people a will is easier for me and harder for my kids because they've got to go change title and get my name off of accounts on the back end. A trust is harder for me and easier for my kids. I'm pre-probating and doing all the work now to get it into this trust. And to your point, my opinion, Texas is a will state because probate is so simple. A well-drafted will gets you through probate pretty quick. I'm always quick to tell clients, jokingly, but sort of not, is attorneys get more money on trust. So if somebody is just pumping a trust in your throat, maybe make sure we're doing it for the right reasons. But that's the general concept.
Yeah. And I've heard attorneys say that everybody needs a trust, and I'm not sure that I agree with that.
No, I mean, I think there's a misconception of one, probate is a 4-letter word to a lot of people, right? They've heard about it. It's miserable. It's terrible. Texas probate is not. That's where I start. And if the sole reason is probate avoidance, there are other easier ways to get there. Trusts are valuable and that may be the best option. But in my mind, it's not trust first and then will. To me, it's will first. Do we need a reason to go to a trust? Maybe, but let's make that analysis before we jump to it.
Before I got into this, I was one of those who was like, you just hear probate and you just go to nightmare. Like they're just
Right.
connected. When I started really looking into this, I thought, why is probate such a bad thing? You're transferring ownership. It seems like the right thing to do. I think the reason probate's gotten such a bad name is because we put it off, we don't plan well, and then these nightmares show up. And people's personalities, their best selves are not always
Yeah.
present.
That's true. And I think you hear about the cases that go terribly. I would
Yes,
say 98% of probate is not contested, but I'm not going to write a book about an
right,
uncontested probate that lasted
right,
32 years, right?
for
So,
sure. Right. And that's the point of this podcast, is to educate people, to motivate them to make a plan so that the stress is off of them and their families down the road, and just doing my part here. So do you have to have an attorney to probate in Texas?
most of the time you do. Some smaller counties will let you do it without an attorney. Most of the larger counties, Harris, Montgomery, Fort Bend, they're going to require you to have an attorney to at least get that initial application filed. You used to be able to do it without. I think just since it's so procedure based, if you're not an attorney, you forget an affidavit or forget something silly and it kind of backlogs the court. So they eventually said, listen, we'd love to help you. I know attorneys are expensive, but if you're going to probate here, you got to have one.
And you really can't probate. I mean, you don't get a choice. You have to probate in the county where the residence was. Is that correct?
Where they resided or where the bulk of their property is.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good to know. And so a small estate affidavit, is that something that an attorney has to?
No, so that's one piece. So shifting from kind of probate alternatives, in my opinion. And when I say probate, to me, we are doing a full application. We're getting somebody appointed as an executor.
Right.
To your point, some estates are small, or we don't have many assets, or we don't need a full administration. Small estate affidavit is one of those things you can work with the court on to apply yourself and get all the heirs signed.
And you don't plan for those. So estate planning would involve an attorney, and with the thought of either going to probate or having a trust to avoid probate.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So if I have a will, can I avoid probate?
You can. So I explain to people, it's a good question. Common misconception, even sometimes among my clients, is, oh, now I have a will. I don't have to go to probate. A
Uh-huh.
will just makes probate cleaner, faster, cheaper, right? I explain to clients, it's kind of like your easy tag. You don't have to sit in line and fumble with change and figure it out. And who knows who's going to do what. You
Right.
just got it. You zip through. I don't have to go to a judge and say, well, so-and-so died. I'm not sure where they wanted their assets to go. And I don't know who they wanted to be in charge.
Right.
I can just show them the document and say, hey, we just need you to approve it. Let's move on.
Right. And so with a will comes an executor.
Yep.
Do people refer to executrix anymore, or is just everybody an executor?
Most people would say just say executor. I
Yeah,
think
that's what I thought.
when I practiced, there was still kind of a distinction. So I probably still say executrix sometimes, but I will
Mhm.
say it confuses my clients.
Yeah. Can you talk about independent versus dependent executor?
Yeah. So in Texas, right, I mentioned probate is pretty clean and pretty simple. That is because we have the option of an independent executor. And all that means is that I am independent of the court. So once I get appointed as the executor, the court doesn't want to hear from me anymore. Right. Their public policy is like, listen, if the dead guy trusted you, we're going to trust you. So just go do what you need to do. Go transfer bank accounts, go sell the house, do what you need to do. A dependent administrator, if for some reason we can't get appointed as an independent, there's no will or people are contesting, the default option, like in most states, is a dependent administrator. And that's the closest thing I think to the nightmare probate that people talk about is I am dependent on the court, meaning every time I want to pay an expense or sell a piece of property or do anything with the estate, I've got to get permission from the court. So that's where,
Right.
yeah, you do end up paying me to file a motion every time when we got to sell real estate. Oh, we got to pay this bill. We got to pay these fees. So you're locked into court a lot longer.
Right.
So what the goal is independent, and that's largely what a will kind of does is all you have to put in that document is I want independent administration, those two words. And that kind of fast tracks it.
Yeah. So that's one that's a lot of people don't understand if they're writing their own will. when
Yeah.
when my husband, so I was avoiding probate. I was not probate. I was avoiding a plan. I did not
Mhm.
want to talk about a will. I did not want to talk about. And so eventually I came around and my husband downloaded, a will from some online place.
Mhm.
And we got to the question, do we want an independent executor or dependent? And we were like, I don't know, we'll let her choose. And so we checked both boxes. It was like, no, we don't
Whichever
get
one
to,
you want. Yeah.
she doesn't get to choose. Right. Oh man, that's not there anymore. But I do want to say, I think another misconception is that if there's an independent executor, that means they get to do whatever they want. That's not true. They still have to follow what's in the will.
That's true. That's a good point. You're just independent of the court. I mean, you're
Right.
still within their jurisdiction. And if a beneficiary doesn't like it, they can always go back to the court and say, I don't think they're doing the right thing. And you're right. They don't have any discretion to not distribute this cash bequest or not give the property to. Their primary fiduciary duty is to carry out the decedent's intent, right?
Right.
Laid out. They still got to follow those rules for sure.
Right.
Good point.
And it's not a democracy. So if there are several beneficiaries listed in the will, the executor is the one that makes the cut, right? That they make the call.
That's right. Yeah. And that's kind of the advantage, right, to me, or the purpose of having a will or having something in place is if I've got 4 kids, I died 10 years from now. I don't need 4 votes and voices in the room, especially to your point, the stuff that you deal with. I mean, like the personal property, the personal stuff, bank accounts are easy to divide, but all that personal stuff, like, I want this ring, I want this necklace. The executor's there to say, okay, I gave you a shot, but here's what's going to happen. You get
Right.
this, you get this, period.
Can you talk about what somebody wants to think about when they're choosing an executor?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always tell people, I don't care who you choose. Just make sure it is the best fit for that position. And being a good fit for an executor, thinking through what they're going to have to do. One, I need you to be organized, focused. So somebody who's, a starving artist and, I'll get around to it when I can, not the best person. Somebody who knows how to manage personalities, right? You're going to be, even if it's family, you're going to be dealing with not just personalities that you've dealt with over the years, but grieving personalities who are, let's say I tell people whether loved your dad or hated your dad, when they pass away, there is a reaction emotionally and you're not thinking as clearly as you normally do. So
Right.
somebody
Right.
who can compartmentalize a little bit, and like I'm grieving, but there's a job that needs to be done. And the biggest thing is you've got to be organized and accountable. So everything that comes in, make sure you're tracking it. Even in estates that are contested, somebody's going to ask, hey, what happened in this account? Well, I know that there's a $5,000 charge here. What was that about? So somebody who can stay focused and all guys get the job done. I tell people, it's not like a trustee where, you're managing a trust long-term. I don't need you to be super financially savvy, but can you organize debts and assets, pay the debts, manage your siblings or whoever your beneficiaries are, and then as promptly as we can, in my mind, just get in and out of probate,
Yeah.
get the assets to everybody, somebody
Right.
focused like that.
Because life doesn't start stop because probate is there. You still have to go to soccer games. You still have to
Yep.
do all
That's
the
exactly
things.
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So
It's a
I
lot to
tell people
juggle.
it's kind of it's a part-time job for about 90 days.
90 days would be great. What can you do to make your executor's life easier when they're trying to do all this?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I wish more clients listened to attorneys or just thought practically about it. In addition to just having a will or something, a place that tells us where to go, just I call it a letter of instruction. Some people call it an I love you letter. But the best thing that I can do for my executor is just keep an updated list of all of my assets, where they are, all of my passwords, all of my usernames. So, and ideally to me, a 1-page piece of paper. If I have never met you in my life and you appointed me as executor, I can pick up that paper. I know exactly where your bank accounts are, what real estate you own, how to log into your social media, how to log into your bank accounts. It's intimidating for people to kind of put that on paper and stuff, but it is going to make your executor's job a million times easier and smoother. And I don't have to track down credit reports or tax returns to figure out you still have this policy, you still have this account. And because as soon as somebody passes away, beneficiaries will be asking questions. And even in states that are uncontested, there's always a sentiment of, well, dad always told me, mom said we had this, or what happened to this account? Mentally not thinking, well, that was 5 years ago. In their brain, it's, oh, she just told me this.
Uh-huh.
I just need that. You can say to the executor, here's what there is. Here's what we're going to do. The executor doesn't have to spend the next 2 weeks calling around and figuring out where the accounts are.
Yeah.
It sounds like a simple kind of silly thing, but thinking practically and having experienced it, when your loved one dies, you are not thinking or wanting to think about that stuff. And you're not
Right.
always thinking practically, it's, clients call me like, what should I do? Like, well, call the credit bureau or, check the mail. And then they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Like, it's because your dad just died. And you don't want them to have to focus. The whole point of all of this planning is just to make that transition as clean, as smooth as possible. So to me, you can focus on the more important things, which is grieving your dad or your mom, or just the kind of technical transferring property material stuff. Let's make that as clean as we can.
Yeah. I've done a lot of work with grief and how it affects us through the years. And part of it is we can't just jump from, I'm going to work my 8 to 5 job, and then I'm going to jump into doing what I need to do it as an executor and prep. Like when we're grieving, we need time to just stare off in the ocean. We need
Yep.
time to just, we
That's
don't have to
exactly right.
do anything. We need to make margin in our root, in our heads and in our hearts to recalibrate what's just happened. There's a change. And
I think that's a great point. And we I don't say partner, but we started kind of making relationships with grief counselors in the area for that reason. I wish we'd done it sooner. But and to my point earlier, we get a lot of people who are like, well, I didn't have a relationship with him and I'm just the executor. Like, I know you didn't, but there's still an emotional connection. And whether that's I love them or I hated them, you got to have time to manage and work through that. And people, I think,
yeah,
underestimate what's going on mentally. And I can do this and this and this all at the same time.
how much does probate cost, Nick?
For uncontested, I would tell you there's probably a range of 1,500 to 3,500. I would say most good attorneys, in my opinion, if it's uncontested, will flat fee it. I know the time frame, I know the courts, I know what I need to file. If it's contested or we think there's going to be an issue, maybe you're looking at more 5 to 10,000. Right, you're going to do it hourly. But to my earlier point, I would say 97 to 98% of probates are uncontested, and you're just working through it.
Just moving through it. So what about estate taxes? I've heard, that's another thing. People talk about death taxes
Right. Right.
I don't know if that's true for taxes or not. Can you talk about?
Yeah. Good question. Estate taxes have become, I would say, less of an issue these days. Always good to issue spot, but the estate tax is essentially the federal government taxing you on the privilege to transfer property to your beneficiaries. So there's no state level tax in Texas, estate tax or
Okay.
inheritance tax. Each state is different, so if you
Right.
pass away somewhere else, you got to make that examination. But there is a federal estate tax that applies across the board, and the way it works is if I die and I own over a certain value of property, I owe that tax. If I own value of my estate is less than that amount, I don't owe that tax and I don't even have to file a return. So, and it used to be, that number 20 years ago was $600,000. So if I had $1 million life insurance policy, I was already over that amount. I'd have to plan for it. Today, it is $12.9 million per person. So it's just skyrocketed over the years. That's why I say it's not as much of an issue these days for most people. Good to just issue spot and make sure we don't have that issue, but it's just not as much of a planning point these days.
Right. So that makes me think that, a lot of when people are spewing out negative things about probate and death taxes and, all the issues that they're having. And then you get all this chatter from other people who could live in other states, who
Yep.
could have experienced this 10 or 15 years ago, and things have changed since then. And so some of the drama around this season comes from getting bad information from outdated material or from people
Yep.
that aren't pertinent to Texas and our area of Texas. And so that's another reason why I like this probate podcast, because it's current. What you're talking about
Yes.
is right now. I love that. So can you share an unusual or a complicated case that you've worked on and give us an idea of how y'all made a difference for a family?
The one that comes to mind immediately is we recently did a case. It's probate. I'll tell you, it's probate related, but it was a very rare case. I think even from my experience was a husband went missing and the wife was left with, you know, everything was in his name. He made all the money. He was the CFO of the family. And they had video of him in his truck driving down I-45. And then I lost track of him. And he's still technically missing. It's been 4 years.
Oh, wow.
But the wife at that time was not ready to, you can declare somebody deceased if we suspect foul play or we haven't had heard from him in a certain period of time. But she was not ready to say, yes, he's dead. Let's go to probate. But one, to your point on just keeping her focused and honestly being available, I feel like half of my job is really just fielding phone calls and meeting with people saying, you're doing fine. You're doing the right thing. So I think we did a good job of that. In addition to finding a creative solution that did not involve tying her to the court for the next 10 years and having to account to the court and getting a kind of de facto power of attorney in place. He didn't have any planning. He didn't have anything in place that said, if I drop dead or become incapacitated, here's who I want to be in charge. He didn't have the will that said, if I'm dead, here's who gets my stuff. He had a power of attorney from another state that was 15 years old that appointed somebody who had passed away. So the default would be, well, we've got to get some kind of guardianship in place. But I mean, how do you do that when the person is not technically gone? We don't even know where they are.
Right.
So I was proud of our firm, not necessarily me, but our firm as a whole, kind of figuring out a creative solution to balance hey, you can't just wait and sit for him to come back. I mean, we don't know where he is. I don't know why he did what he did or what's happened, but we've got to slowly move forward without pulling her into a litigation court process. And so she's got what she needs in terms of control of assets. She can declare him deceased when she's ready. But I thought, one, it was a unique case even for us, and kind of tested my legal knowledge and theories of, okay, well, he's not dead. He's technically incapacitated. We don't really know what's going on.
Right.
So
How strange.
it was fun is not the right word. I enjoyed being able to help her
The
think
challenge.
outside the box. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. The challenge was,
Yeah. A lot of puzzle pieces there. You guys had to figure out what to put where and how to benefit without having to live to look at the picture.
well, that's right. And I think people underestimate, there are third parties involved, but any estate, the banks, the title companies, that's kind of who you're dealing with.
Right.
With wills and powers of attorney. I have it on paper, but will they accept it? How do I get it past an underwriter in New York or a title company in Florida? And so it was a fun challenge, certainly unique. And they're always kind of the, contested matters or a child who shows up that nobody knows about that you can work through. But it's an interesting case that came up recently.
That is really interesting. So one of my goals with the podcast here, is to educate on the terms and the procedures of estate planning and policies so that people can know what to expect. And we take some of the mystery, some of the stigma maybe away from these topics that are so difficult for us that a lot of us want to avoid, myself included before. And now look what I'm doing. But, how do you see from your seat, how do you see what I do as helping your clients? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I mentioned it before the podcast started, but you do a phenomenal job. So I don't know how well you take compliments, but with all of our clients, I'm thrilled to have you as a resource in a industry that I don't know how many people do that, or if they do, they overcharge for it, in my opinion. But I tell people I do the legal technical side of, I'm going to get the assets transferred. I'm going to work you through court. Let me do talk to the judges and other attorneys. We will get all the technical title stuff done. As you know, that is in my mind, it's kind of a small part of the probate process. There's also the grieving and all of the other assets and property and moving parts. Could I do that? Probably. Do you want to pay me by the hour to come to your family? Probably not. But so all of that, I call it probably maybe the dirty work, the nitty gritty, the walking, they'll come to my office for an hour, probate court in an hour. There are 23 other hours in the day. There's lots of other stuff to do. And that's where, to me, you are coming in as an invaluable resource just to walk them through. I think the case you worked on recently, you're a hoarder and what do I do with this house? I live out of state. I've got property here. What am I supposed to do with this property? The personal, I don't want it. Who do I contact to get rid of this table? All of that's kind of coordinating and negotiating and kind of, I think of you as, so you're kind of the general contractor of the probate. You're kind of like, hey, we have this asset. Okay, let me find the best way to do that. So you don't have to think about it. You can just grieve, talk to your family, and I will take care of all that stuff. That's pretty difficult to work through.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. And I appreciate the feedback. It's also been really nice to work with you and your team to know that I can encourage the people that I'm working with and point them back to you because I know how you guys are going to follow through. So it is nice to work with your team as well. What's it like when somebody calls to set up a first, let's say they're finally agreeing to do an estate plan. So let's
Mhm.
talk about what their first consultation would be with you and then follow-ups to that and maybe how long it would take before they would actually have everything signed and notarized.
Yeah, that's a good question. So leading up to the consult, we try to just tag them with kind of an intake form, necessarily for all information, but just to get them thinking about these topics. And I tell people, you don't need to fill that thing out, but if you walk in not thinking about any of this, it's not going to be a productive conversation.
Right. Right.
But just getting them thinking through, okay, who are my beneficiaries? Who do I want to be in charge? Who's the guardian? So that goes out probably a week before the meeting. Meeting itself is probably an hour or less. And I walk them through the buckets of, hey, who gets your stuff? What if you're incapacitated? Do we have any asset protection concerns? And for most people at the end of that, my goal at the end of that meeting is to give them a recommendation of, hey, you need a will, powers of attorney, transfer on death deed, or you know what? You probably do need a living trust to kind of consolidate, prevent contest, give them a flat fee in writing. I'll send them a follow-up email that same day. Again, people hearing this stuff for the first time will sometimes get overwhelmed or just forget as soon as they walk out the door. To your point, they have thought about this for 3 to 5 years, just now kind of getting to it. So same day follow-up. And then we have a 1 week, 2 week, full week touch process, which is kind of keeping them. We have found statistically, if I can get you in, drafted and signed within 30, 45 days, you will have an estate plan and it's going to be great. Past that, you're going to fall back mentally into, I don't want to deal with this. It's, in their mind, I checked the box. Well, I got to the next step. I talked to an attorney, it's not depressing, but frustrating to me to see the plans that we have drafted and ready to sign, and they just can't come in for 15 minutes. They get it executed. Even after hey, this is not the place yet. You got to get it executed. But that's our process. It's always on a flat fee. I think that the max we charge is probably $2,000. Most good estate plans are probably $750-ish.
And does your plan include the powers of attorney and those other?
Yep. So and any basic plan to me is wills, powers of attorney, guardian, transfer on death deed if you need it, disposition of remains if you have specific cremation requests. Yeah, I call that any ancillary document we're happy to include. And the changes within 5 years are complimentary. I think people get intimidated, but they don't want to think about it. So even if, there's, I want to change my executor, it's it's going to be another fee, or I don't want to think about this again. So we'll touch base with clients once a year, just with the letter or phone call and say, hey, anything changed? Do we need to think about it again? Just kind of be as proactive as we can. I can't, force you to come in, but, I think most people, the biggest compliment I always get is, oh, that was easier than I thought. I wish I'd done it sooner. It really is just super simple to put down on paper, because most people know what they want to happen or think what's going to happen. So,
yeah. I think you said something that's really important to just kind of highlight. And that is, you've got all this drafted, but it's not executed until it's signed.
Yep.
And
nothing's enforced until you actually sign on the dotted line.
Wow. That's a big thing. That's a big, big thing, because that means there is no will until it's executed.
That's exactly right. I cannot take an unsigned will to a judge and say, would you please enforce this intent? I know they want it, unfortunately, right? And I don't think I've had 1 or 2 clients who actually think oh, I thought it was enforced. Most people are just well, that was the next step. I'll get to signing at some point. So I think we annoy some of our clients with our phone calls and emails, but it's important to me. I'd rather some people are I haven't paid yet. Then don't pay. Come in and sign it. I'd rather you have something in place. So you're not having, your kids are going to have to pay me more on the back end.
Right.
We don't want something on paper.
Oh man, you've gone through all of this, which is the hardest part.
That's
just
exactly
come in
right.
and sign it. Yes. It really is only hard. It was hard for me because I had to stop and think about who I wanted to do what. And it's not hard like manual labor. It's just stuff I don't want to think about. So if someone is listening and they're on the fence about making a plan for whatever reason, maybe they're in their 30s and they're thinking, I'm too young, I'm too busy, or they're in their 50s and they're just, whatever. What would you say to them to encourage them to get off the fence and go ahead and move forward with that plan?
Well, I will say it's not how much you have, it's what you have. That's a comment. I don't have enough of a estate. If you've got a house and a bank account, you need something on paper, right? If you got a bank account and a car, something on paper. So that's not And to a point earlier, it is probably the easiest thing that you will ever do. A good attorney to me will help you think through,
Right.
take away the kind of intimidating aspect of either meeting with an attorney, thinking about what if I drop dead, just making it easier for your beneficiaries. I hit home with a lot of people when I talk about like, do you want this to be easier for you and harder for your beneficiaries? Or do you want it to be as easy as possible for your kids, your spouse, whoever you're leaving it to? And most people are like, well, I don't want to leave a big burden. Then get something on paper that eases that burden and makes it a little sooner. And
Right.
to me, I don't think you can do an estate plan too soon, right? You're 20, 25, 30, 35. Most people don't do it until they're 50, 60, close to retirement. I would love it if people did it 28, 30.
Right. And you just made another good point too about if you've got a car and a bank account. So even if you have an apartment, if you don't have a house or property,
Yeah.
you still have an estate, and you still have stuff that you need to pass down.
That's right. When somebody's got to close out that stuff, right? They
Right.
talk to the apartment landlord, try and deal with the vehicle or the Chase Bank of America, whatever, right?
Nick, how can people connect with you? Where do they find you?
Website is best. I'm always, probably most responsive via email. I know that we have a LinkedIn that our staff is fantastic about updating, and I never seen in my life, but I know people use it. I think we've got a Facebook also, but website and email is probably the best.
Okay. And that's stanfieldanddupre.com.
StanfieldDupre.com. That's right.
Yeah. All right. Oh, I wanted to say that I read an article that you wrote, and you said something like, you need people every step of the way. It's okay to ask for help.
Yep.
And I thought that was really, really important to underline. Nick, is there something that you feel like we should have talked about and maybe didn't? Is there something about estate planning or your firm that you feel like needs to be said?
No, I don't think so. The most important part we hit on earlier was just what I wish that most people would do was have that love letter of instruction to my executor that makes it easy for me to find assets, log into bank accounts and Facebook and stuff like that. But that's a good way to end it. Yeah, I would encourage people, whether estate planning or probate, it is okay to ask for help. And in my mind, having something rather than nothing is great. I don't mind do-it-yourself wills or something. Let an attorney take a peek at it. 75% of people don't have any estate planning. Right? That's the statistic that comes out every year. So, but everybody has kids, assets, bank accounts, right? And so I would love it if I had less work to do, meaning more people had an estate plan. So,
Right, for sure. Nick, thank you so much for your time today. Again,
thank you,
I
Sherri.
enjoy
Absolutely.
time with you, and yeah, I appreciate your help in doing this, and we will see you around the woodlands somewhere.
Thank you so much.
That's all I have for now. New episodes of the Probate Podcast will come out on Thursdays. I also have a free public support group called Houston Probate Support on Facebook. You don't have to live in the greater Houston area to be a member, but I'd love to have you join me there. I'd love to have you join me on any of these platforms, including this podcast, and I'll share the links of where you can find me in the show notes below. I'm looking forward to us connecting. See you next time, and remember, you matter.